do this. Sorry, folks, I have to share this. And do this. I'm real sorry, folks. I'm really sorry, folks. I went live by accident, and I have to put Gracie out. I know I said 2:30, but we'll be back in a minute. Give me 5 minutes to put Gracie out and everybody to get here, and then I will go ahead and start reading. Let me just. I needed 20 minutes to get this all up and running, but you're gonna have to watch me do it. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. And okay, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go freshen up my tea and put Gracie out. Okay. I'll see you guys shortly. I didn't mean to hit the live button. That's the problem. I'm getting old. Oh, 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 oh. Come on, Gracie. Let's go, babies. Come on. Come on, baby. Where are you? You gotta go, babies. All right. Sorry for the false start. All righty. Oh, I gotta find my live here, manage videos, live. There we go. Hang on a second. Alrighty. Okay, now. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Reading with Beverly Wolfe, the next chapter in These Happy Golden Years by Laura Ingalls Wilder. All right, here we go. Hi. Bonjour. Mon français n'est pas bon. I really don't speak French. I am a transplant from Ontario. First, chapter 2. All right, now I have to bring my light down here so I can see what I'm reading. Okay, that has to be fixed. Okay. Chapter 2. First day of school. Laura heard the stove lid rattle. For one instant, she was in bed with Mary and Pa was building the morning fire. Then she saw the calico curtain and she knew where she was, and that today she must begin to teach school. She heard Mr. Brewster take down the milk pail and the door slam behind him. On the other side of the curtain, Mrs. Brewster got out of bed. Johnny whimpered and was still. Laura did not move. She felt that if she lay still enough, she might keep the day from coming. Mr. Brewster came in with the milk, and she heard him say, "I'm going to start the school in the firehouse. I'll be back by the time breakfast is ready." The door slammed behind him again. All at once, Laura threw back the covers. The air was biting cold. Her teeth chattered and her fingers were so stiff that she could not button her shoes. The kitchen was not so cold. Mrs. Brewster had broken the ice on the water pail. And people think they have it tough today, eh? And was filling the tea kettle, and she replied pleasantly to Laura's good morning. Laura filled the wash basin and washed her hands and face at the bench by the door. The icy water made her cheeks tingle, and her whole face was rosy and glowing in the looking glass above the bench while she combed her hair before it. Slices of salt pork were frying, and Mrs. Brewster was slicing cold-boiled potatoes into another frying pan on the stove. Johnny fussed in the bedroom, and Laura quickly pinned her braids and tied on her apron and said, "Let me fix the potatoes while you dress him." I'm sorry, folks. I just came out of a live where, people were telling, not a live, where I read a comment out where saying, "Oh, you people, you are so unhealthy and you eat junk and la, 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 la." I thought, what would you do if you had to live on salt pork and potatoes? Three meals a day, 7 days a week. If I tried to feed my husband that, I'd be put in jail. Anyway, just how much we've changed over the years, eh? So while Mrs. Brewster brought Johnny to the stove and made him ready for breakfast, Laura finished slicing the potatoes and salted and peppered and covered them. Then she turned the slices of meat and set the table neatly. "I'm glad Ma told me to bring this big apron," she said. "I like a real big apron that covers your whole dress, don't you?" She has to learn not to try and make conversation with Mrs. Brewster. Be lucky that she was pleasant, okay? Mrs. Brewster did not answer. The stove was red now, and the whole room was warm, but it seemed bleak. Nothing but short, necessary words were said at the breakfast table. It was a relief to Laura to put on her wraps and take books and her dinner pail and leave the house. She set out the half-mile walk through the snow to the schoolhouse. The way was unbroken, except for Mr. Brewster's footsteps, which were so far apart that Laura could not walk in them. As she floundered on, plunging into the deep snow, she suddenly laughed out loud. "Well," she thought, "here I am. I dread to go on, and I would not go back. Teaching school cannot possibly be as bad as staying in that house with Mrs. Brewster. Anyway, it cannot be worse." Then she was so frightened that she said aloud, "I've got to go on." Black, soft coal smoke rose against the morning sky from the old claim shanty stovepipe. 2 more lines of footprints came to its door, and Laura heard voices inside. For a moment, she gathered her courage, then she opened the door and went in. The board walls were not battened. Streaks of sunshine streamed through the cracks upon a row of 6 homemade seats and desks that marched down the middle of the room. Beyond them, on the studding of the opposite wall, a square of boards had been nailed and painted black to make a blackboard. In front of the seats stood a big heating stove. Its round sides and top were cherry red from the heat of the fire, and standing around it were the scholars that Laura must teach. Imagine leaving the school door open and a fire going for children just to walk in. Nowadays, people would go, "They're going to burn the schoolhouse down. They're going to touch the stove." Mm-hmm. I think we required a lot of our children back in, 150 years ago, right? This was, about 150 years ago. We required a lot of our children. They had to grow up really fast, yet they had to be respectful. You know what I mean? They had to pull their weight. Okay. In front of the seats stood a big heating stove. Its round sides and top were cherry red from the heat of the fire. And standing around it were the scholars that Laura must teach. They all looked at Laura. There were 5 of them, 2 boys and 1 girl. 2 boys and 1 girl were taller than she was. "Good morning," she managed to say. They all answered, still looking at her. A small window by the door let in a block of sunshine. Beyond it, in the corner by the stove, stood a small table and chair. This is the teacher's table, Laura thought, and then, oh my, I'm the teacher. Her steps sounded loud. All eyes followed her. She put her books and dinner pail on the table and took off her coat and hood. She hung them on the nail in the wall by the chair. On the table was a small clock. Its hands pointed at 5 minutes to 9. Somehow she had to get through 5 minutes before time to begin school. Slowly she took off her mittens and put them in the pocket of her coat. Then she faced all the eyes and stepped to the stove. She held her hands to it as if to warm them. All the pupils made way for her, still looking at her. She must say something. She must. "It's cold this morning, isn't it?" she heard herself say, and then, without waiting for an answer, "Do you think you can keep warm in the seats away from the stove?" One of the tall boys said quickly, "I'll sit in the back seat. It's the coldest." The tall girl said, "Charles and I have to sit together. We have to study from the same books." "That's good. Then you can all sit near the stove," Laura said. To her joyful surprise, the 5 minutes were gone. She said, "You may take your seats. School will begin." The little girl took the front seat. Behind her sat the little boy and the tall girl and Charles, and behind them the other tall boy. Laura rapped her pencil on the table. "School will come to order. I will now take your names and ages." 15 years old, a school teacher. The little girl took from the front seat. Behind her sat... Oh, okay. The little girl was Ruby Brewster. She was 9 years old. She had brown hair and sparkling brown eyes, and she was all soft and still as a mouse. Laura knew she would be sweet and good. She finished the first reader, and in arithmetic, she was learning subtraction. The little boy was her brother, Tommy Brewster. He was 11 and had finished the second reader and reached short division. The two sitting together were Charles and Martha Harrison. Charles was 17. He was thin and pale and slow of speech. Martha was 16. She was quicker and spoke for them both. The last boy was Clarence Brewster. He too was older than Laura. His brown eyes were even brighter and livelier than his little sister Ruby's. His dark hair was thick and unruly, and he was quick in speaking and moving. He had a way of speaking that was almost saucy. Clarence, Charles, and Martha were all in the fourth reader. They had passed the middle of the spelling book, and in arithmetic they were working on fractions. In geography, they had studied the New England states, and they answered questions so well that Laura set them to learn the Middle Ages. The Middle Atlantic states. None of them had studied grammar or history, but Martha had brought her mother's grammar, and Clarence had a history book. "Very well," Laura said. "You may all begin at the beginning in grammar and history and exchange the books to learn your lessons." When Laura had learned all this and assigned their lessons, it was time for recess. They all put on their wraps and went out to play in the snow, and Laura breathed a sigh of relief. That first quarter of the first day was over. Then she began to plan. She would have reading, arithmetic, and grammar recitations in the forenoon, and in the afternoon, reading again, history, writing, and spelling. There were 3 classes in spelling, for Ruby and Tommy were far apart in the spelling book. After 15 minutes, she rapped on the window to call the pupils in. Then until noon, she heard and patiently corrected their reading aloud. The noon hour dragged slowly. Alone at her table, Laura ate her bread and butter, while the others gathered around the stove, talking and joking while they ate from the dinner pails. I'm sorry, I'd have had a kettle on that stove and I'd have had tea, always on the go. Gathered around the stove, talking and joking while they ate from their dinner pails. The boys ran races in the snow outdoors while Martha and Ruby watched them from the window, and Laura still sat at her table. She was teacher now and must act like one. At last the hour was gone, and again she rapped on the window. The boys came in briskly, breathing out clouds of frosty breath and shaking cold air from their coats and mufflers as they hung them up. They were glowing from cold and exercise. Laura said, "The fire is low. Would you put more coal on, please, Charles?" Willingly but slowly, Charles lifted the heavy hod of coal and dumped most of it into the stove. "I'll do that next time," Clarence said. Perhaps he did not mean to be impertinent. If he did mean to be, what could Laura do? He was a chunky, husky boy, bigger than she was and older. His brown eyes twinkled at her. She stood as tall as possible and rapped her pencil on the table. "School will come to order." Though the school was small, she thought it best to follow the routine of the town school and have each class come forward to recite. Ruby was alone in her class, so she must know every answer perfectly, for there was no one to help her by answering some of the questions. Laura let her spell slowly, and if she made a mistake, she might try again. She spelled every word in her lesson. Tommy was slower, but Laura gave him time to think and try, and he did as well. Then Martha and Charles and Clarence recited their spelling. Martha made no mistakes, but Charles missed 5 words and Clarence missed 3. For the first time, Laura must punish them. "You may take your seat, Martha. Charles and Clarence, go to the blackboard and write the words you missed each 3 times. Charles slowly went and began to write his words. Clarence glanced back at Laura with a saucy look. Rapidly, he wrote large, sprawling letters that covered his half of the blackboard with only 6 words. Then turning towards Laura and not raising his hand for permission to speak, he said, "Teacher, the board's too small." He was making a joke of punishment for failing in his lesson. He was defying Laura. For a long, dreadful moment, he stood laughing at her, and she looked straight at him. Then she said, "Yes, the board is small, Clarence. I am sorry, but you should erase what you have written and write the words again, more carefully. Make them smaller, and there will be room enough." So he basically got punished himself because he wrote out a bunch of words, and then she had him erase them and do them correctly. So it's like, good job. He had to obey, for she did not know what she could do if he did not. Still grinning good-naturedly, he turned to the blackboard and wiped out the scrawls. He wrote the 3 words 3 times each, and below them he signed his name with a flourish. With a relief, Laura saw that it was 4 o'clock. "You may put away your books," she said. When every book was neat on the shelves beneath the desktop, she said, "School is dismissed." Clarence grabbed his coat and cap and muffler from their nail, and with a shout, he was first through the doorway. Tommy was at his heels, but they waited outside while Laura helped Ruby into her coat and tied her hood. More soberly, Charles and Laura wrapped themselves well against the cold before they set out. They had a mile to walk. Laura stood by the window and watched them go. She could see Mr. Brewster's brother's claim shanty only half a mile away. Smoke blew from its stovepipe, and its west window glinted back the light from the sinking sun. Clarence and Tommy scuffled in the snow. Ruby's red hood bobbed along behind them. So far as Laura could see from the eastern window, the sky was clear. The school shanty had no window from which she could see the northwest. If a blizzard came up, she could not know that it was coming until it struck. She cleared the blackboard, and with the broom she swept the floor. A dustpan was not needed. The cracks between the floorboards were so wide. She shut the stove's drafts, put on her wraps, took her books and dinner pail, and shutting the door carefully behind her, she set out on her morning path towards the Brewster's house. Her first day as a teacher was over. She was thankful for that. Let me see how long the next chapter is. Shall we do another chapter? Well, the sewing machine works. I wouldn't use it on I'm going to use it to put together some quilt tops, but then it's going. I have like 3 sewing machines that all need to be serviced. And once they're serviced, that little one's going in my motorhome. Why? Because it's a perfect fit for my motorhome, right? Shall we go for one more chapter, folks? I didn't see anybody answer. Okay. Yes, please. All right. That's all it takes. Chapter 3, 1 week. As she went trudging through the snow, Laura made herself feel cheerful. Mrs. Brewster was hard to get acquainted with, Laura thought, but she could not always be cross. Perhaps this evening would not be so unpleasant. Laura went in, snowy and glowing from the cold, and spoke cheerfully to Mrs. Brewster, but to all her efforts, Mrs. Brewster answered shortly or not at all. I would just ignore her. I would. I'm sorry. At supper, no one said a word. The stillness was so sullen and hateful that Laura could not speak. After supper, she helped with the work again and sat again in the darkening room while Mrs. Brewster silently rocked. She felt sick from wanting to be at home. As soon as Mrs. Brewster lit the lamp, Laura brought her school books to the table, set herself lessons, and determined to learn them before bedtime. She wanted to keep up with her class in town, and she hoped she could study hard enough to forget where she was. She sat small in her chair, for the silence seemed to press against her from all sides. Mrs. Brewster sat idle. Mr. Brewster held Johnny asleep on his lap and stared into the fire through the stove's open draft. The clock struck 7, struck 8, it struck 9. Then Laura made an effort and spoke. It's getting late. I'll say good night. Mrs. Brewster paid no attention. Mr. Brewster started and said, good night. Before Laura could hurry into bed in the cold dark, Mrs. Brewster began quarreling at him. Laura tried not to hear. She pulled the quilts over her head and pressed her ear against the pillow, but she could not help hearing. She knew then that Mrs. Brewster wanted her to hear. For Mrs. Brewster said she would not slave for a hoity-toity snip that had nothing to do but dress up and sit in a schoolhouse all day. She said that if Mr. Brewster did not put Laura out of the house, she'd go back east without him. She went on, and the sound of her voice made Laura feel sick. It was the sound that enjoyed hurting people. Laura did not know what to do. She wanted to go home, but she must not even think of home, or she might cry. She must think of what to do. There was nowhere else to stay. The other 2 houses in the settlement were only claim shanties. At the Harrisons, there were 4 in one room. And Mr. Brewster's brother's house, there were 5. They could not possibly make room for Laura. She did not really make Mrs. Brewster any work, she thought. She made her bed and helped with the kitchen work. Mrs. Brewster was quarreling now about the flat country and the wind and the cold, and she wanted to go back east. Suddenly, Laura understood. She isn't mad at me. She's only quarreling about me because she wants to quarrel. She's a selfish, mean woman. Mr. Brewster did not say a word. Laura thought, I've just got to bear it. There isn't anywhere else I can stay. When she woke in the morning, she thought, I've only got to get through one day at a time. It was hard to stay where she was not wanted. She took care to make no more work for Mrs. Brewster and to help her all she could. Politely, she said good morning and smiled, but she could not keep on smiling. She had not known before that it takes 2 to make a smile. She dreaded the second school day, but it passed smoothly. Clarence idled instead of studying, and Laura dreaded that she must punish him again, but he knew his lessons. Perhaps she would have no trouble with him. It was strange that she was so tired at 4 o'clock. The second day was over, and the first week would be half gone at noon tomorrow. Suddenly, Laura caught her breath and stood stock still on the snowy path. She thought of Saturday and Sunday, 2 whole days in that house with Mrs. Brewster. She heard herself say aloud, "Oh, Pa, I can't." It was whimpering, and she was ashamed when she heard it. No one else had heard. All around her the prairie was empty, white and far and still. She would rather stay there in the clean cold than to go into the mean house or go back tomorrow to the anxious school day. But the sun was setting, and tomorrow it would rise. Everything must go on. That night Laura dreamed again that she was lost in a blizzard. She knew the dream. She had dreamed it sometimes, ever since she really had been lost with Carrie in a blizzard. But this blizzard was worse than before. Now the stinging snow and the wind's hard blows tried to drive her and Carrie off the narrow sofa. Laura held on to Carrie with all her might for a long time, but suddenly Carrie was not there. The blizzard had got her. Laura's heart stopped in horror. She could not go on. She had no more strength. She sank down into the dark. Then Pa came driving from town on the bobsled, and he called to Laura, "How about going home for Saturday? Half pint?" Ma, Mary, and Carrie and Grace were so surprised. Mary said happily, "Oh, Laura." Ma's whole face lighted with her smiling. Carrie hurried to help Laura take off her wraps, and Grace jumped up and down, clapping her hands. "Charles, why didn't you tell us?" Ma said, and Pa answered, "Why, Caroline, I said I'd do a little hauling. Laura's little." And Laura remembered how at the dinner table, Pa had drunk his tea and pushed back his cup and said, "Guess I'll do a little hauling this afternoon." Ma said, "Oh, Charles." Laura had not gone away from home at all. She was there. Then she woke up. She was at the Brewsters, and it was Saturday morning. But the dream had been so real that she almost believed it. Pa might come home to take her home over Saturday. It was like him to plan such a surprise. There had been a snowstorm in the night. She had to break her path to the schoolhouse again. The early sunshine was faintly pink on the miles of pure snow, and every little shadow was thin blue. As Laura plunged and plowed through the soft drifts, she saw Clarence breaking a path for Tommy and Ruby behind him. They floundered to the school shanty's door at the same time. Little Ruby was covered from head to foot with snow. Even her hood and braids were snowy. Laura brushed her and told her to keep her wraps on until the room was warmer. Clarence put more coal on the fire while Laura shook her own wraps and swept the snow through the cracks between the board floors. The sunshine streaming through the window made the shanty look warm, but it was colder than outdoors. But soon the good stove's warmth made their breaths invisible. It was 9 o'clock, and Laura said, "School will come to order." Martha and Charles came in panting, 3 minutes late. Laura did not want to mark them tardy. They had to break their path the whole time. A few steps in deep snow are easy and fun, but breaking a path is work that grows harder with every step. For a moment, Laura thought of excusing Martha and Charles this one time, but that would not be honest. No excuse would change the fact that they were tardy. "I'm sorry I must mark you tardy, but you may come to the stove and get warm before... You may come to the stove and get warm before you take your seat." "We're sorry, Miss Ingalls," Martha said. "We didn't know how it would take so long." "Breaking a path is hard work, I know," said Laura, and suddenly she and Martha were smiling to each other, a friendly smile that made Laura feel as if teaching school were easy. She said, "Second reader class, rise, pass to the front." Ruby, the second class rose and came to stand in front of her. The whole morning went smoothly. At noon, Ruby came to Laura's desk and shyly offered her a cookie. After dinners were eaten from the dinner pails, Clarence asked her to come out and snowball, and Martha said, "Please do. Then we'll have 3 on each side." Laura was so pleased to be asked and so eager to be out in the sunshine and clean snow that she went. It was great fun. She and Martha and Ruby fought against Charles, Clarence, and Tommy. The air was full of snowballs. Do you know they wouldn't let us do snowballs in school when we were kids? You got caught throwing a snowball, you ate your lunch outside the principal's office. We just bubble wrap our kids, don't we? The air was full of snowballs. Clarence and Laura were the quickest of all, dodging and scooping and molding the snow with their mittened hands, and throwing and dodging again. Laura was glowing warm and laughing when a great burst of snow exploded in her eyes and her open mouth and plastered her whole face. "Oh, gee, I didn't mean to," she heard Clarence saying. "Yes, you did, and it was a fair hit," Laura answered, blindly rubbing her eyes. "Here, let me. Stand still," he said, took hold of her shoulder as if she were Ruby, and wiped her face with the end of her muffler. "Thank you," Laura said, but she knew she must not play any more. She was too small and too young. She would not be able to keep her pupils in order if she played games with them. That very afternoon, Clarence pulled Martha's hair. Her brown braid whisked across his desk as she turned her head, and he caught it and gave it a tug. "Clarence," Laura said, "don't disturb Martha. Give your attention to your lessons." He gave her a friendly grin that said as plainly as words, "All right, if you say so, but I don't have to." To her horror, Laura almost smiled at him. Barely in time, she kept her look stern. Now she was sure she would have trouble with Clarence. Wednesday was gone. There was only Thursday, and then Friday. Laura tried not to expect Pa would come for her, but she could not stop hoping. It would be so like Pa to come and save her from a miserable 2 days with Mrs. Brewster at Mrs. Brewster's house. But of course, she did not know how miserable it was. She must not expect him, but surely he might come if the weather were good. If he came, there were only 2 more evenings to endure, and then Friday night at home. Still, she did not expect him. She must not, or she would be so disappointed if he did not come. They were missing her at home, she knew. If the weather were pleasant, surely he would come. But Friday morning, the sky was stormy and the wind was colder. All day at school, Laura listened to the wind, afraid that its sound would change to a blizzard's howl and the shanty suddenly shake and the windows go blank. The wind blew colder through the cracks. Its sound rose from every drift of the snow scudded across the prairie. Laura knew now that Pa would not come. 24 miles in such weather was too much for the horses. How am I going to get through the time till Monday, Laura thought. Wretchedly, she turned her eyes from the window and saw Charles sitting half asleep. Suddenly, he jumped wide awake. Clarence had jabbed his arm with a pin. Laura almost laughed, but Clarence caught her glance and his eyes laughed. She could not let this pass. "Clarence," she said, "why aren't you studying?" "I know all my lessons," he said. She did not doubt it. Clarence learned quickly. He could keep up with Martha and Charles and have plenty of idle time. "We will see how well you know your spelling," she said. She tapped on the table. "Third spelling class, rise and come forward." The shanty trembled in the wind that every moment howled louder around it. Heat from the red-cheeked snow melted the snow that was blown through the cracks and made wet tracks on the floor. Clarence correctly spelled every word that Laura gave him. While she wondered whether she should dismiss school early if she waited and the storm grew worse, Charles and Martha might never reach home. It seemed to her that the wind had a strange silvery sound. She listened. They all listened. She did not know what to make of it. The sky was not changed. Gray, low clouds were moving fast, above the prairie covered with blowing snow. The strange sound grew clearer, almost like music. Suddenly, the whole air filled with a chiming of little bells. Sleigh bells! Everyone breathed again and smiled. 2 brown horses swiftly passed the window. Laura knew them. They were Prince and Lady, young Mr. Wilder's horses. The sleigh bells rang louder and then stopped. Then a few bells shook out small tinkles. The brown horses were standing close enough to the south wall in the shelter of the shanty. Laura was so excited she had to steady her voice. The class may be seated. She waited a moment and then, you may all put your books away. It's a little early, but the storm is growing worse. School is dismissed. Thank you for joining me for chapter 2 and 3 of These Happy Golden Years by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I love you guys. We'll see you again soon. Patrons, don't forget, it's Freaky Friday. No, it's Sassy Saturday. I'll see you tonight at 9 o'clock. Take care. God bless.